On December 5, 2001, in a meeting with congressional leaders, President Bush threatened to veto the defense appropriation bill because of funding, quote, that is not needed at this time. On December 6, 2001, Senate Republicans objected to the emergency designation for the Homeland Security funding in the defense appropriation bill and raised a Budget Act point of order. Efforts to waive the budget point of order failed. On December 7, 2001, after negotiations with Senate Republicans, Homeland Security programs were reduced by over $3.6 billion. The Senate then passed the Defense Appropriations Bill. In April and May of 2002, the Senate Appropriations Committee held 5 bipartisan hearings, led and conducted by Senator Ted Stevens and me, concerning the defense of our homeland. Senator Stevens and I and others on that committee, Republicans and Democrats, heard from governors and we heard from mayors. We heard from firemen, we heard from law enforcement and emergency medical personnel. We heard from specialists in the field of counterterrorism. And based on those hearings, the Committee on Appropriations in the Senate produced a bipartisan supplemental appropriations bill to continue our effort to provide immediate resources to improve our nation's capacity to deter and respond to terrorist attacks. On May the 22nd, 2002, the Senate Appropriations Committee, by a vote of 29-0, reported out a supplemental appropriations bill that included $8.3 billion for Homeland Defense programs. And once again, on June 4, 2002, the President threatened to veto the bill because he believed that it contained unnecessary Homeland Security spending. On June 7, 2002, the Senate passed the Supplemental Appropriations Act for further recovery from and response to terrorist attacks on the United States. The bill provided $8.3 billion for Homeland Security programs, including the following amounts above the President's request: $265 million for airport security funds, $646 million for first responder programs, $716 million for port security. However, under pressure from the White House conferees on that bill were forced to reduce Homeland Security funding from $8.3 billion to $6.7 billion under pressure from the White House. In negotiations with House Republicans, Homeland Security funding was dropped for cybersecurity, for improved capacity for the Centers for Disease Control to investigate potential biological attacks, for airport security, for the Coast Guard, and for the Customs Service. On July 24 of this year, the Senate passed the conference report to the Supplemental Appropriations Act for further recovery from and response to terrorist attacks on the United States. Get this now. We're talking about war here. The war on terrorism. Where? Here. In this country. Which reduced the $8.3 billion for Homeland Security appropriated by the Senate to $6.7 billion. Did the White House agree to fund the full $6.7 billion for Homeland Defense program? Did it? No. The White House talks a good game on Homeland Defense. But the White House support is more about rhetoric than it is about resources. In order for the President to spend $2.5 billion for the Homeland Defense spending, it was necessary for him to do what? Just sign his name on a document designating the funding as an emergency requirement. What did the President choose to do? Did he choose to sign his name and start that $2.5 billion to flowing into the states and counties, municipalities of this country? No. The President chose not to make that designation. In making that decision, he terminated $2.5 billion of funding for the FBI, funding to train and equip our nation's firefighters, funding for the Corps of Engineers to help shore our water supply, funding for security at nuclear facilities, funding for the Coast Guard. Now tell that, Mr. President, at your next meeting, at your next campaign meeting, your next fundraiser, when you're talking about making war on Iraq, tell the people there what I've been reading. It's facts. These are for the record. One of the lessons we learned at the World Trade Center on September 11 was that our fire personnel could not communicate by radio with police personnel. That local officials could not communicate with state and regional personnel. When the president decided to block the $2.5 billion, he blocked the $100 million that we approved to help state and local governments across the land to solve the problem, and $90 million to provide medical assistance to the first responders at the World Trade Center was lost. What is the president's solution to the imminent threat to our nation's homeland security? Rhetoric? Yes. More bureaucracy? Yes. Resources to respond to the immediate threat? No. Mr. President, there's reference to this commander-in-chief business that we hear about. Oh, the commander-in-chief, they say. I listen to my friends across the aisle here talk about the commander-in-chief. We must do this for the commander-in-chief. We must stand shoulder to shoulder with the commander-in-chief. The commander-in-chief. Of what is he commander-in-chief? Of the Army, the Navy, and the militia of the several states. But who provides the Army and the Navy? Who provides for the calling out of the militia of the several states? Congress. So much for the command, so-called, for the term commander-in-chief. Charles I used that term in 1639. The commander-in-chief. You know what happened to Charles I of England? The swordsman cut off Charles I's head on January the 30th, 1649. So much for the commander-in-chief. Parliament and the king in England fought a war. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Congress fighting a war with the President of the United States? They did that in England. Yes. Parliament and the king fought a war. Who lost? The king. Who was he? King Charles I. And a high court convened on January the 1st, I believe it was, 1649, and within 30 days they had cut Charles I's head off, severed it from his body. So much for Charles I. That was a commander-in-chief. Yeah. Hail to the chief! Hail to the chief! Hail to the chief! Well, I respect the president just as much as anybody else does. But the barons at Runnymede, on the banks of the Thames, on June 15, 1215, took it upon themselves to let the king know that there was a law, and that kings had to live by the law, just as did barons and others. So I don't know who's talking to this president down here. I don't know who among his crowd down there is trying to pump him up. But my friends, this president of the United States is president by virtue of this Constitution. He was created by this Constitution that I hold in my hand, which says in Article 2 that the president shall be commander-in-chief. Article 2 of the Constitution. Constitution has it. And yet this administration refers to the Constitution in this National Security Strategy of the United States of America, printed on September 2002, refers to the Constitution not even with a capital letter. The Constitution, America's Constitution. What's the matter with those people? Haven't they studied the Constitution down at the other end of the avenue?